you know? Comes a time in life when you realize that the American dream isn't just about success, it's about finding your piece of heaven on earth. For me and my family, that dream was an 80-acre ranch in the heart of Texas. But what I thought would be our sanctuary almost became our nightmare. Thanks to some people who forgot a fundamental truth, a man's home is his castle. Today, I want to share with you a story that changed everything for my family, a story about standing up for what's right. Even when the odds seem stacked against you. Sarah and I had been talking about it for years. City life was wearing us down. The noise, the traffic, the constant rush. Our kids were growing up fast, and we wanted them to experience something different. Something real when we found this ranch, 80 acres of rolling hills, pine trees, and a beautiful little lake. It felt like destiny calling. I remember the day we signed those papers at the county courthouse. Sarah squeezed my hand and whispered, "We did it, honey. We actually did it." The first few months were pure bliss. Weekend after weekend, we'd drive out there with camping gear, fishing poles, and enough food to feed a small army. The kids would spend hours by that lake learning to fish, skipping stones. Just being kids the way kids used to be. I'd watch them from our little campfire, and Sarah would lean against my shoulder. "Listen," she'd say. "No sirens, no car horns, just birds and wind through the trees." Those were some of the happiest moments of my life. Little did I know that someone else had been watching us, two people who believed they had the right to tell us what we could and couldn't do on our own land. Now, before I go any further, let me ask you something. Have you ever dealt with an overzealous homeowners association? If you have, you know what I'm talking about. If you haven't, consider yourself blessed. This particular HOA governed a subdivision about 2 miles from our ranch. 2 miles. But apparently, distance doesn't matter when people think they own the world. It was a perfect Friday afternoon in late spring when everything changed. We had just set up camp by the lake. The kids were laughing, and Sarah was unpacking our picnic. The sun was shining. The water was like glass. It was one of those moments you want to bottle up and keep forever. Then I heard the engines coming down our dirt road. Coming fast. What happened next shook me to my core and taught me a lesson about property rights that every American needs to hear. If you've ever felt like someone was trying to push you around on your own property, or if you believe in the fundamental right to enjoy what you've worked hard to buy, you're going to want to hear the rest of this story. Hit that subscribe button, because next week I'm going to tell you about the confrontation that changed everything. Last week, I told you about our dream ranch, shady acres of Texas paradise that my family and I thought would be our peaceful retreat. We had the deed. We had the county records. We owned every inch of that land, fair and square. But as I was saying, sometimes the American dream collides with people who think they know better than the law itself. The sound of those engines got louder and louder. I stood up from our campfire, shading my eyes against the afternoon sun. A white SUV was barreling down our private road, and I mean barreling. Dust flying everywhere like they were chasing someone. My first thought was that maybe someone was hurt, needed help. But when that SUV screeched to a halt and I saw the decals on the side HOA enforcement, my heart sank. Out jumped two people I'd seen before at a few community meetings. Greg, tall guy, always wearing a polo shirt like he was about to play golf, Fawn Marcy. A woman who seemed to believe that being on an HOA board made her some kind of elected sheriff. Now, I'm a peaceful man. I believe in treating people with respect. So when Greg marched toward our campfire like he owned the place, I tried to stay calm. "Afternoon, folks," I said. "Something I can help you with?" Greg didn't even acknowledge the greeting. He pointed at our tents, our campfire, our kids playing by the water, and said, "I'll never forget these words. What do you people think you're doing here? You people." Like we were trespassers. Like we were criminals. I felt Sarah move closer to me. The kids had stopped playing and were watching. You know how children sense tension? They were feeling it. "We're camping," I said, keeping my voice steady. "This is our land. We're camping on our own property." Marcy stepped forward, hands on her hips. "Your property," she said with this laugh that made my blood pressure spike. This area falls under HOA jurisdiction. You need permits for camping, for fires, for I held up my hand. Ma'am, I'm going to stop you right there. I bought this land. I have the deed. I have county records. You have absolutely no authority here. The look on their faces, it was like I just told them the earth was flat. Greg pulled out his phone. I'm calling the sheriff, he said. You're trespassing on HOA property. Folks, I want you to imagine how that felt. Standing on land that you saved for, that you sacrificed for, it represents everything you've worked toward, and having someone tell you that you're a criminal. For being there, my wife grabbed my arm. Honey, she whispered, what if they're right? What if we missed something? For just a moment, doubt crept in. You know how it is when someone says something with enough authority? Even when you know they're wrong, you start to question yourself. But then I looked at my kids. They were scared. They were looking at their dad to make it okay. And I realized this wasn't just about property rights anymore. This was about teaching my children what it means to stand up for what's right. So I walked over to our truck, pulled out the folder with all our documents, and came back. Here, I said, these are the county records. This is our deed. Call whoever you want to call, but we're not moving. 15 minutes later, 2 patrol cars came down that dirt road. I won't lie to you, my heart was pounding. But sometimes, doing what's right means being willing to face the consequences. What happened when those officers arrived changed everything. Not just for that day, but for how I understood property rights in America. The conversation that followed opened my eyes to something that every property owner needs to understand. Next week, I'm going to tell you exactly what those officers said, and how the truth about our situation was even more shocking than we realized. Because it turned out, we weren't the ones who were trespassing. If this story resonates with you, if you believe in property rights and standing up for what's yours, please hit that like button and subscribe. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. And leave me a comment. Have you ever had to stand up to people who thought they could push you around? I read every single one. In our last episode, I told you about the confrontation that changed everything, how HOA members tried to kick my family off our own land, and how they called the sheriff on us for trespassing today. I want to tell you what happened when those patrol cars arrived, because the truth that came out will shock you, and more importantly, taught me something about property rights that every American needs to understand. I'll be honest with you, when those 2 patrol cars came down our dirt road, my hands were shaking. Not because I was afraid of the officers, but because sometimes, even when you know you're right, the system can be unpredictable. The first deputy was a middle-aged man, professional, courteous. Good afternoon, he said. We got a call about a trespassing situation? Greg and Marcy immediately started talking over each other, pointing at our campsite, our kids, our fire. They have no permit, Marcy was saying. This is HOA property. They can't just— The deputy held up his hand. Let me talk to the property owner first. He looked at me. Sir, do you have documentation showing this is your land? I handed him our folder, deed, county records, survey maps, everything. He studied them carefully, really carefully. His partner joined him, and they had a quiet conversation I couldn't hear. Finally, the first deputy looked up. Mr. Johnson, he said, that's not my real name, by the way. This documentation shows you own this property outright. 80 acres, including this lake and camping area. Relief flooded through me. But the officer wasn't done. He turned to Greg and Marcy. Folks, this isn't HOA property. This is private land. If you have a dispute about property lines or easements, that's a civil matter you'd need to handle through the courts, not through law enforcement. The look on Greg and Marcy's faces, I almost felt sorry for them. Almost. But then Marcy said something that made my blood boil. Well, we've been using this area for our community activities for 2 years. We have established rights. The deputy raised an eyebrow. Ma'am, using someone else's property without permission isn't establishing rights. That's called trespassing. That's when it hit me. For 2 years, while we'd been planning and saving and dreaming about this land, these people had been treating it like their personal playground, using it, changing it, without asking, without permission. After the officers left and after Greg and Marcy drove away, muttering under their breath, decided to take a walk around our property. What I found made me realize this situation was even worse than I'd thought. Sarah came with me, and we followed the property markers. About a quarter-mile from the lake, we found a wooden dock. A nice one, too, clearly cost some money to build. It was on our land, about 15 feet past the property line. Then we found hiking trails. Cleared paths with little wooden signs pointing toward community picnic area. All on our property. There was a fire pit made of stacked stones. A wooden bench. Even a small shed where they apparently stored kayaks and fishing equipment. Sarah just stood there, shaking her head. "Honey," she said, "they've been running a recreation area on our land." I pulled out my phone and started taking pictures. GPS coordinates, video of the property markers, everything, because I realized we weren't just dealing with overzealous HOA members anymore. We were dealing with people who had systematically taken over part of our land and claimed it as their own. Folks, let me tell you something important. Property rights aren't just about a piece of paper. They're about the fundamental American principle that what you work for, what you save for, what you legally purchase, that's yours. Nobody gets to take it from you, no matter how long they've been using it or how entitled they feel. But property rights also come with responsibility. You have to defend them. You have to stand up when someone tries to take what's yours. Because if you don't, if you just let it slide, you're not just losing land, you're losing a piece of what makes this country. It's great. After documenting everything we found, I knew we had a choice to make. We could let this slide, avoid conflict, try to work out some kind of compromise. Or we could do what Americans have always done when someone tries to take what's theirs. We could fight back. I called our attorney that Monday morning. What he told me about our legal options and about what we could demand from these people was music to my ears. Next week, in our final episode, I'm going to tell you exactly how we reclaimed our land, how we made sure this never happened again, and what every property owner can learn from our experience. If you believe in property rights, if you think people should respect what belongs to others, hit that like button. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it. And tell me in the comments, what would you have done in our situation? I love hearing your thoughts and experiences. Over the past 3 weeks, I've shared with you the story of how my family's dream ranch almost became our nightmare. Thanks to HOA members who thought they could claim our land as their own, we discovered that for 2 years, they've been using our property as their personal recreation area, building docks, trails, fire pits, and storage sheds without permission. Today, I want to tell you how we fought back, how we won, and most importantly, what every property owner can learn from our experience. Monday morning, I called our attorney. Now, I'm not a litigious person. I believe in solving problems through conversation when possible. But sometimes, people only understand one language: legal action. Our lawyer, David, listened to the whole story. When I finished, there was silence on the phone. "Well," I said, "do we have a case?" David chuckled. "Jim, again, not my real name, you don't have a case. You have a slam dunk. These people have committed multiple violations of property law. Trespassing, unauthorized improvements, conversion of property. We can demand they remove everything and pay for restoration." The next week, Greg and Marcy received a certified letter. It was polite but firm. Remove all unauthorized structures from our property within 30 days. Cease all trespassing. And provide compensation for unauthorized use of our land. I figured that would be the end of it. I was wrong. The following weekend, Sarah and I drove out to the ranch to check on things. As we pulled up to our camping spot, we saw them again: Greg, Marcy, and about 6 other people. They were having some kind of community meeting around their fire pit. On our land, I parked the truck and walked over. "Folks," I said, "you received our letter. You're trespassing." Greg stood up, and for a moment I thought we might have a real problem. He was red-faced, angry. "You can't just kick us out," he said. "We've been using this area for community events. These people depend on this space." One of the other people, an older woman I'd never seen before, looked at me with tears in her eyes. "Please," she said. "This is where our book club meets. This is where we bring our grandchildren. Folks, I want you to understand something. That moment was hard. These weren't evil people. They were neighbors who had gotten used to something that was never theirs to begin with. But sometimes doing what's right means standing firm even when it's uncomfortable. I looked at that woman. I said, "Ma'am, I understand this place means something to you. It means something to us too. That's why we bought it. But this is our property. If you'd like to use it, you need to ask permission and respect our rights as owners." Greg scoffed. "Permission? We don't need permission to." I held up the letter from our attorney. "According to the law, you do. And according to this legal notice, you have 3 weeks left to remove your improvements and stop trespassing." The tension was thick. But something had changed. Maybe it was the legal letter. Maybe it was the fact that we documented everything. But you could see the fight going out of them. They packed up and left that day. Over the next 2 weeks, they came back with trucks and tools, removing the dock, the shed, the fire pit, filling in the trails. It was like watching our property return to its natural state. But the real victory came the following month. We were camping by the lake, the whole family, including Sarah's parents who'd driven down from Dallas. The kids were fishing, Sarah was reading a book, and I was just sitting by our fire watching the sun set over our lake. Our lake. That's when I realized what we'd really fought for. It wasn't just about property lines or legal documents. It was about the right to enjoy the fruits of your labor. The right to build something for your family without having it taken away by people who think they know better. My father-in-law, a Vietnam veteran who worked construction his whole life, put his hand on my shoulder. "You did the right thing, son," he said. "A man's got to stand up for what's his. That's what this country's built on." Let me share with you the 3 most important lessons I learned from this experience. First, document everything. From the day you buy property, keep every record, take photos, know your boundaries. When someone challenges your rights, you need proof. Second, don't be afraid to stand up for yourself. People will only push you as far as you let them. Respect is earned by showing that you respect yourself and your rights. Third, remember that property rights aren't just personal. They're fundamental to who we are as Americans. When you defend your property, you're defending a principle that protects all of us. Today, our ranch is everything we dreamed it would be. A place where our kids can run free, where we can disconnect from the world's chaos, where 3 generations of our family can come together around a campfire and remember what really matters. We've made peace with our neighbors. Greg and Marcy still live in the area, and while we're not exactly friends, we respect each other's boundaries. Some of the other folks from that original group have even asked permission to fish in our lake, and we've said yes. That's how it should work: respect, communication, mutual benefit. But most importantly, our children learn something valuable. They learn that standing up for what's right isn't always easy, but it's always worth it. They learn that in America, you have the right to work hard, save your money, buy your piece of the dream, and protect it. To everyone who's followed this story over the past month, thank you. Thank you for listening, for sharing your own experiences in the comments, for reminding me that we're not alone in believing that property rights matter. If you're facing a similar situation, don't give up. Know your rights, document everything, get legal advice when you need it, and remember you're not just fighting for property. You're fighting for the principles that make this country great. If this story has meant something to you, please subscribe to our channel. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. And tell me in the comments, what does property ownership mean to you? What would you fight to protect? Until next time, remember, your home isn't just where you live, it's where you make your stand. God bless, and thanks for watching.